Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you from wherever you're tuning in to watch another important discussion being held by the South Sudan Women Intellectuals Forum. We welcome you all. The title of our topic for this discussion is Advancing Women's Agenda in South Sudan, Male Perspective. Our panelists are Honorable Pia Philip, Honorable Rajab Mohandes, Dr. Jacob Dutchol Riak, Mr. Edmund Yukani, and currently, we don't have Mr. Mathiang Manasseh with us, but we hope that he'll join us shortly. I'm going to go ahead and read a short biography of our panelist. Honorable Pia Philip serves as the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Peace Building in the government of South Sudan. He also works at the Center of Humanitarian Dialogue and seconded to the South Sudan NGO Forum Secretariat in Juba to serve as the Risk and Compliance Manager. Honorable Philip was the Minister of Education in Western Equatoria and the defunct Budwe State, respectively, from 2012 through February 2020, and is the longest-serving state minister in South Sudan. He initiated and championed the Partnership for Recovery and Resilience program as an instrument for supporting the vulnerable communities to recover from the shocks of war and violent conflict in South Sudan. Previously, he was the Deputy Education Team Leader for USAID South Sudan. Honorable Philip holds a master's degree in education leadership, policy, and development from the University of Bristol and is currently pursuing an MBA from the Open University in the UK. Next is Honorable Rajab Mohandes, who's among our panelists. Honorable Mohandes is the Executive Director and co-founder of the Organization for Responsive Governance based in Juba, South Sudan. He's a signatory to the Revitalized Agreement on the Resolution of the Conflict in the Republic of South Sudan and represents civil society in the Reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, an oversight mechanism for the peace agreement. Honorable Mohandes is a coordinator of the South Sudan Civil Society Forum. He served as State Minister of Transport, Roads, and Bridges. He has worked for national and international organizations in South Sudan for over 10 years. Honorable Mohandes holds a master's degree in international development, majoring in politics and governance from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom, and a Bachelor of Science in Education from Bugema University in Uganda. Our next panelist is Dr. Riak Dutchol Riak. Dr. Riak is a comparative political scientist who is an assistant professor of international and comparative politics and former head of Department of Political Science at the University of Juba. He undertook his graduate studies at the London School of Economic and Political Science and graduated with master's degree in comparative politics and obtained Doctor of Philosophy in comparative politics at the University of Juba. Dr. Riak teaches both undergraduate and master's students. He lectures on comparative politics, methods of political inquiry, North-South relations, human rights, regional integration, among other important subjects. He is the founder and the executive director of the Center for Democracy and International Analysis, abbreviated CDIA, registered as a research academic think tank in Juba. The CDIA does policy design and research on good governance and democratization in South Sudan. Dr. Riak is currently the advisor of South Sudan accession to regional economic committees and visiting senior research fellow at Danaher Institute of University of Massachusetts, Amherst in the US, specializing on American political thought. Our next panelist is Mr. Edmund Yukani. Mr. Edmund Yukani is the Executive Director of Community Empowerment for Progress Organization, abbreviated CEPO. Mr. Yukani holds a degree in law and is a renowned human rights and peace activist. In 2017, he was a recipient of the Civil Rights Defender of the Year Award. Over the years, Mr. Yukani has received numerous accolades and awards. He's a frontliner in promoting women meaningful participation in political life. And I am Eunice Malath. I am a registered nurse by profession, a media specialist, and your moderator for this discussion. During the discussion, we encourage you to interact with the panelists, provide your feedback, and also feel free to ask questions. As mentioned previously, the title for our topic for this discussion is Advancing Women's and Gender in South Sudan, Male Perspective. Let me go ahead and provide you an introduction about this important topic. Despite the work of governments, the United Nations, and other international and regional organizations, as well as the many years of struggle by women's movements for equal rights, inequalities between women and men persist around the world. Gender-based violence remains prevalent in all societies and is exacerbated in conflict and post-conflict situations. For millions of women and girls, education and employment opportunities are restricted, leading to inequalities in income and access to decision-making. Maternal mortality persists at unacceptable levels in parts of the world. Women's economic and social dependence leads to persistent vulnerabilities, including in the context of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Men's lives are complex and are shaped by more than their gender identity. Race, ethnicity, class, caste, sexuality, religion, and nationality all influence how men identify their interests. The increased recognition of the need to involve men in promoting gender equality has been accompanied by the growing motivation of men to become engaged. This motivation can emanate from a variety of sources, including men's relationship with women, their concern for their own personal well-being, or that of their families, or their sense of social justice. In their families and communities, men live in social relationships with other women and girls as wives, partners, mothers, sisters, aunts, daughters, nieces, friends, classmates, colleagues, and even neighbors. The quality of these relationships in large part determines the quality of men's lives. Men can increasingly see that their lives are also damaged by a system of gender inequality that has a negative impact on the women and girls with whom they live, work, and interact in different ways. Many men make sacrifices for their children and want their daughters to grow up in a world that offers young women security, freedom, and opportunities to fulfill themselves. This provides a powerful reason for many men to support gender equality. I'll go ahead and start with you, Honorable Philip, by asking you the first question. What are the objectives and the mandate of the Ministry of Peace Building, and how many women are in the ministry? Also, what are the key roles these women are playing within the ministry? Can you please unmute yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Eunice, and thank you again for inviting me to be part of this very important discussion. I will go straight to the question. The mandate of the Ministry of Peace Building. First of all, the Ministry of Peace Building was created by the Revitalizer Agreement, and it is mandated to create and implement policies, structures, and platforms that can promote peace, non-violence, promote dialogue, reconciliation, and healing, and also try to engage South Sudan towards sustainable peace. So that's the mandate of the ministry. And the role that the ministry does basically is really to coordinate the efforts of many players of peace building and to also give visibility to the South Sudanese that peace is here and we can still have an opportunity to resolve our conflict through dialogue. That's the mandate of the ministry, and the ministry is still new, and we very much depend as a ministry on the work that is done by interfaith, by civil society organization, by women, by traditional leaders. And we intend really to build a very strong early warning and early response structures from the national to the Payam level, so that South Sudanese have an opportunity to converse among themselves. We also believe that peace building cannot stand alone. We intend to work with different partners so that sustainable livelihood for women and for youth is an integral part of the peace building in South Sudan. So that's the mandate that we have. It's a huge mandate that we can only achieve when we work collaboratively with everybody who is supporting the move for peace. In the ministry, as a new ministry, we have 4 directorates, but already we have one woman who is to become one of the director general. So we are working towards bringing women on board to participate at the higher level. We know the minister is a man, the undersecretary is a man. We cannot miss from the 3 or 4 directorate to have a woman as a director general. We also have women who are directors for reconciliation, for reasons that we'll be discussing later, because we know how strong a woman is in that issues of reconciliation. So that's where we are. Back to you.
Sorry about that. Yes, that's really important. We hope that the installation of the female director will occur soon. Now, Honorable Mohandes, why is good governance and rule of law an important component of democracy? And why do you think women should be included in the agenda of good governance?
Okay, thank you. Well, first, good governance attempts to set the principles of management of public affairs. In other words, it tends to define the rules of the game in management of public affairs or in politics broadly. And in that regard, it talks about, it defines this by outlining elements like participation, like inclusivity, and responsiveness in management of public affairs. And so when we look at these elements, we find that this brings together everyone, tries to bring together everyone.
Your screen is frozen.
And as South Sudanese, defined by citizenship that includes both men and women. And that's why it's important that in terms of participation, in terms of creating an inclusive environment for this participatory governance, it should involve all of us as citizens, and that means both men and women. And for our case in South Sudan particularly, we have records indicating that women played very important roles in the process of the governance of our struggle. Until today, of course, everyone knows and speaks about this, that women were so much involved in managing. While most of the fighters were men at the battlefield, women were holding the society down together. They were taking care of families, and most of the generation that we have after the war, the liberation struggle, were generations that grew up in the hands of women. That's an important role in society. But beyond that, when we talk about the path to our independence, women have been involved so much in campaigns around the world, but also at the ballot box during the referendum. So there is no way we can create an inclusive society or run governance in a country like South Sudan, which would only be mainly dominated by men. And so in that regard, good governance tries to bring everyone on board, and also attempts to say that whatever happens in governance or in leadership should respond to the needs of the population and should be based on their free consent. As John Garang once said, that governance should be based on the free consent of the governed. And that then means all of us, and both men and women in that regard. Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, indeed, our women played a pivotal role during the liberation struggle, and they should be not only commended for that, but the government also needs to act upon the intelligence and the capabilities of our women. So thank you for those remarks. Now, Dr. Riak, kindly explain what syllabus South Sudan is using and which level of education should be reformed immediately to improve the education system in South Sudan. Also, please provide gender-lensed strategy that should be used. Should the use of women be considered immediately as part of the reform? Why or why not, in your opinion? You're muted, please.
Hello?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you very much, Eunice, and thanks to my colleague in the panel. Great to be here. So the syllabus or the curriculum we are using in South Sudan is very Eastern Africa. We are using the 844 system of education, which basically talk about 8 years when you are in the primary school, then you spend 4 years when you are in secondary school, and then you spend 4 years when you are in the university. And this system of education is more or less criticized because it doesn't help to make both male and female to have what we call the industrial training. It's more of a standardized training whereby you have to get to class 8, then you get to Form 4, you get to university after 4 years, and then you look for a job. So we're using this system of education, and we are very much cognizant about the women participation in education, both basic and higher education. If you look at the higher education level where I come from, at the universities, we are very much gender sensitive in a way whereby we promote both roles of males and female, because we're all aware about gender is both constructive roles of both male and female. We are very much cognitive of that, and we have gone further to ensure that we promote women and empower them as far as higher education is concerned. We began this at the university about 4 years ago, where we installed what we used to call Women Leadership Institute. Of course, now we change it from women to be called Institute of Leadership, Institute of Transformative Leadership, which of course help to train rural women on basic skill like accounting, business, commerce, literacy levels, writings, and basic accounting. We are doing this to ensure that women come at the same footing with their counterpart male, and also go beyond what the counterpart male do at the level of the higher education. We are also very cognizant of ensuring that hard sciences, or you call them natural sciences, are not meant for male society or like male driven. So we encourage a lot of women to go to hard sciences like engineering, mathematics, medicines. And as we speak today, I can tell you the College of Medicines has about 38% of women who have enrolled in medical school at the final year. And this is a very good sign of emancipation of women to take over what the counterpart do as male. And I know in the next 5 years, we will be having like over 60% female at the School of Medicine. We're also doing the same thing in most colleges, and we ensure that women do more than what the male do. On term of inclusivity, as I've said earlier, we are also very inclusive in teaching staff. I remembered 4 years or 3 years ago, we had the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, who was a female, Professor Pauline Riak. And we had a lot of other senior women like Dr. Julia, who also come from Kenya. She served as a dean. We also had a Tanzanian colleague who is also very well known. She is actually the director for the Transformative Leadership Institute, and other fellow women who are taking up senior position at the deanship at the University of Juba. So we are very much aware of that. What is lacking, and we should do better, is to work on policies and critical regulation to ensure that certain gaps are actually left for women. Why should we do this? We have to appreciate that women are naturally intelligent, and they are naturally good-hearted people in terms of what they do. We have also realized that from studies that women are not corrupt; they are less corrupt. So if the senior positions are taken over by women at the higher education level, we'll see a little bit of transformation in terms of achieving objective and goal of that certain institutions, either being the ministries, either being schools, universities, either being directorates that are there in the higher education. So I believe we have a lot to do, but then we have already laid the foundation to ensure that the issues of women empowerment are critically done at the level of the departments, at the level of the college, at the level of the university, and also at the level of the higher education at all. And I believe we can do more as we move on, because we have seen and we have felt that women have a lot to do because they are multitasking, and they have natural ability and intelligence that God has given them, that they can do better than the male counterpart. Thank you. You can unmute.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. You really addressed an important point in terms of the increase in women enrollment at the School of Medicine. And given that we were mentioned during our introduction, the high mortality rate within our country, it's really pivotal that our women are part of the medical system in really changing the death rate among our women and children. So thank you for those remarks. Manasseh, we welcome you back. Yes, we have Manasseh Matiang here among one of our panelists. Let me go ahead and read Manasseh Matiang's biography. So Manasseh Matiang.
Hello, thank you for having me, Eunice.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Happy here.
And apology, weak internet.
No problem, we understand, no problem. So Manasseh Matiang is a creative and courageous young activist who is dedicated to advocating for peace and justice in South Sudan and Africa. He's a co-founder of Anataban, which means I am tired, a youth movement made up of a community of thousands of young South Sudanese creatives who use art as a platform to address issues affecting their country. Mr. Matiang has been the initiative coordinator since the inception of the youth movement and will be stepping down at the end of April. His reason for stepping down was to create space for youth to take over as he surpasses the youth age last year. As an artist, Mr. Manasseh launched his first album in 2008 called Voice of My Heart, and took a break from music in 2010 to pursue his education. He resumed his music career in 2015, producing several singles such as Junubi Asili, Bagara Dance, Giwaja, Leadership Crisis, and Peace Sign. Mr. Matiang is currently working on releasing his first EP on Africa Day, which will be on May 25th. So welcome, Mr. Matiang. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on and ask you, Mr. Yukani, this really important question. How do South Sudanese men interpret the meaning of gender, feminism, and women's movement? I know these are concepts that sometimes our society does not really think it's conducive to address. Are these terms supported by the broad society, in your opinion? And what role should the male champion play in supporting the agenda of women in South Sudan? Lastly, what has the parties to the agreement failed to implement the 35% affirmative action?
Thank you, Lucy, for having me in this panel, and to my colleagues in the panel. There's a few things that I will not repeat, which are suitable with my questions, but my colleagues have spoken about the description of the role women have played in the society of South Sudan. To start with, these particular terminologies are really, as you said, something that still sound new to our society, simply because our society is a male-dominated society in all aspects, being it governance, being it decision-making, being it participation, is that we trace identity to male line rather than to female line. And this is proved very clear in our referendum. When we're holding our referendum to decide whether to be part of Sudan or South Sudan, then if you're a lost South Sudanese, the nature of the law in the CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement 2005, was very clear that we trace a South Sudanese through the male line, not the female line. And that have really challenged this concept of what do you mean by women movement, but besides also what my colleague Rajab have said about the role women have played in our struggle before we decide for referendum or for self-determination vote. So I think that's a new one. But I think let's say that, yeah, it's a new concept, but it's now building up in our society. And it's specific at cultural level, when we start witnessing female chiefs that sit in customary courts and making decisions on atrocities that sometimes are committed by own fellow female against a man, or a man against a woman, and then you start seeing a female chief start deciding. People start asking about, oh, I think women can play a very big role in decision making. And I think they can play a big role in holding our society. They're very good decision makers. And that's where the concept of women movement, becoming more feminist, become very important. And then the concept of gender mainstream become very important in all aspects of governance. So I'd say it is merging up, it is coming up, it's growing concepts now within our society. It's concept that we're discussing about it. As I've said, for example, I want to use a simple lower level, the customary courts, where you start seeing female chiefs start making decisions that favor the whole best interest of the society. So this terminology start becoming very, very important. People start discussing it. And also with the peace agreement, something happened last week when I was looking at the ministers at states level. I come to realize 4 male who are appointed as the ministers of gender and social welfare and child. And since the inception of South Sudan from 2011, Ministry of Gender is customized like a ministry of women. Like female politicians have to head that ministry. So now having male there, as people start asking questions, and I think that's where now this terminology starts becoming very important. That, oh, everybody starts saying, oh, now men can sit in the ministry where there's a women, men can head the women ministry. So like that's a concept that gender from the traditional perspective sounds like women rather than really a birth constructive role of male and female. I think that's a very good one that we have seen. And also looking into the appointments, I come to realize that there's a 6 male appointed as state governor gender advisors. They're also very important that they have to be appointed, and we can see them play a big role there. So this is what I can add. I can give as a concrete examples with regard to these terminologies, gender mainstreaming, feminist women movement. That's what I'd say. But also women movement in South Sudan, it have a history, it have an impact. We have names that always, whenever people discuss, these names are brought up, and always they come from women movement that all along the struggle since 1974 until today, they play a bigger role. Coming to the other part of the question about why the parties failed to implement the agreement. For me, there are 2 issues there. One, that all the political parties in South Sudan are male-headed political parties. And when people are making choice for who among the party members should hold a seat, mainly on the table, over 60% are men. There are a few women there. That's one particular issue that made the parties to fail. The second issue that I like to bring here, it may sound very controversial to the audience. We have seen a new culture coming among women in political parties. There are women in political parties who are building a culture of politically, we are the only face. Don't look for other faces among women. So there's those women who feel that they're only blessed women to play politics in this country, and they start denying their own fellow women not to take seat. And actually, they start decampaigning when there's a new phases of women coming to the political arena. And these women mainly sounds to be like the only women, the only phases of women in the political arena if talk of women. And the negative role they play is that they start denying their own fellow women not to come into the arena of the politics and not take seats, and which I describe them as women in male mindset in political arena, because they behave like a man and they don't really completely speak out about the issues of affirmative action, violation of 35%. They're so silent. So recently I come across 3 of them. I asked them like, hey, you're holding a very key position in your party. Why do you allow your party not to appoint women? And they said, which women are you looking for? Here I am. I am a female. I said, but you're not enough. You're not the numbers. I'm not after you. I know who you are, but the numbers matters. You alone, you can't make any difference. So this is a challenge. And you can see where women, I want to throw this. Look at the SPLM, the ruling party. The acting secretary general is a female. Go to IU. You have vice president, Dr. Riek Machar. The wife is a key player in the SPLM-IU. Look at SOA. You have Josephine Lagu there, a very key player. So you start asking that we have these renowned women in the political parties. What made them not to campaign? So I think for me also the question is the women leaks in these political parties have no level of influence to pursue the best interests of women in the political arena. That will be my answer. Thank you very much. Over there to you.
Yes, thank you for the great points that you have brought forth. I'm going to go ahead and read some comments from some of our viewers as they are really interacting with you, our great panelists. So we have a comment here from Silvano Yokwe, and it states, At the moment, women seem to be the only alternative to bringing peace in the country. The women should work hard to popularize their agenda. And here we have another comment from Tina Pita, and she states, "Thank you, Mr. Edmund, for speaking the truth on this context. It's a male-dominated society in which we live in. If the leadership fails to give women seats in the leadership, the concept won't be changed and nothing will be changed. One of the reasons I always support SEPO." And then we have a comment here from Dominique Akwai, and he states, "The problem in South Sudan is that people, when talking of gender, they tend to refer to women, but gender means both women and men." Now, Manasseh, are you there with us? Okay.
Yes, I am here with you.
Okay. All right. So I have a question for you here. Who are the youth of South Sudan? Are women encouraged to be part of the different youth groups in South Sudan? And also tell us more about the Anataban movement. What is it, and what are some of the tangible achievements of Anataban?
Okay. Thank you for that question. To start with the first part of the question, who is a youth? Well, to me, and also according to the African Union Youth Charter and the upcoming South Sudan Youth Policy, which we are pushing for, a youth is an individual between the age of 18 to 35 years. And then on the second part of the question, you asked, are women encouraged to be part of the different youth groups in South Sudan? Well, I'll start first by saying that the word youth has no gender. Both the male and the female individuals between the age of 18 to 35 are considered to be youths. So they are highly encouraged to be part of any youth group that is available. And I would like to say that in South Sudan right now, the women, young women have played a huge role in different youth groups, and they have been taking their spaces. I would like to point out some of the few people that, some of the women that I have seen, and I am really inspired by the work they have done. During the high-level revitalization forum, there was a representative of the youth. And in the negotiations, you'll find Emily Koiti, who represented the youth, was really one of the most active participants in the discussions, and was actually a signatory to the revitalized agreement of RRCs. And you will also realize that another very active youth is Christine Kiden, who is the leader of the Youth Coalition, which brings together a lot of youth groups from different organizations. But I must say that apart from the so many opportunities that the female youth have been taking up, I am discouraged by the fact that in the grassroots, you'll find the participation of the female youth is really minimal. And one of the reasons that is because you'll find that many of these young girls face a lot of challenges, including early marriage and early child marriage, and also the society keeps on discouraging the youth because of different perceptions of the roles of the female youth in the community. So you'll find many of the young girls in the grassroots do not get to participate in different levels of youth activities. And now on the question about Anataban, well, Anataban is a coalition of different artists that was formed in the year 2016. The coalition or the movement came as a result of frustrations, as you may know, when the war erupted in 2016, it really got the citizens to be frustrated and devastated. Yeah, and from there, this group of 20 youths decided to make a difference, and from there formed a campaign at the time where they believe the different citizens all around the country can resonate with, and then the name Anataban, which is Arabic for I am tired, came to be. And ever since then, we have grown from 20 to between 800 to 1,000 active youths in different parts of the country and diaspora. And some of the achievements that you will see from these youth groups include, amazing youth group includes the Hagana program, which encourages the youth to take up ownership of the country, Feminism Festival, which was aimed at encouraging the citizens to just to highlighting the role of what feminism is, and encouraging the issue of equality in South Sudan. We have done Sot Al Salam Award. You'll find the South Sudan is Watching campaign, Anatabanju Wahila, and the Narfa Sotna campaign, which is our strategic plan of 2018 to 2020. Yeah, so thank you. Bye.
Wow. I know you guys are doing such an amazing job in Juba. When I was in Juba a few years ago, I could see a lot of drawings on the walls whenever you drive on different parts of Juba, and just really depicting the images that the artists had drawn of Anataban, depicting the suffering or the hope of the population and the youth. So you guys are doing such a wonderful job. I'm going to move on to Honorable Philip. We have a comment here before I ask you the question. We have a comment here from Tina Pita. And I know, Honorable Philip, you had mentioned earlier that we hope to have a director in the ministry who's a female. So the question or the statement is from Tina, which revolves around that. And she states, Honorable Philip, the ministry's mandate is very rich and inclusive. However, implementation is always a big deal in South Sudan. Can the ministry at least involve 2 female directors in the Ministry of Peace? I believe women are first victims of conflict, and they are the breadwinners when they lose the head of the family in conflict, and their voices matters in peace building. I believe if we have many women in that ministry, they will identify best ways in helping the vulnerable, disadvantaged, and the needy. So, so she's asking here, why doesn't the ministry, instead of selecting 1 director, why should they have 2 instead?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, as I mentioned, the ministry is at the recruitment level, but we have 4 directorates. That means we shall have 4 director generals. And so from the 4 director generals, we have already identified 1 female who is already leading, the Directorate of Conflict Resolution, which is actually the pillar for the Ministry of Peace Building. And so, but the other directorates, there is a possibility of bringing 1 more Director General to be a female. So what I was saying is, with the current arrangement, because we are now working with the Ministry of Public Service to have the staff who have been volunteering since last year enter into the public service system. Because we have 4 directorates, we thought that at least we can have 2 Director General who are female. But already we have 1 who has been acting since last year, and there is a possibility of adding 1 more. So this is what we are looking at. We also believe that the Ministry of Peace Building really should depict what we want in the 21st century for our country. We are looking at bringing, at least to the extent possible, 80% or if not 100% of the South Sudanese different ethnic group need to see themselves in this ministry. Because if we are to build peace, and this is the Ministry of Peace Building, we have to start by example. So that when we go out to talk about peace building, to talk about social cohesion, to talk about inclusivity, all South Sudanese should see themselves in the Ministry of Peace Building. It's only unfortunate that we have 4 directorates, that means 4 director generals, but down we have a number of directors, most of whom will be women, because we know the importance of involving women in reconciliation and the conflict resolution or conflict management. That's the short answer I can give, that we are considering that.
Okay, because we also have quite a lot of qualified women in the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum. So instead of, you mentioned the possibility of getting a second director, we could shift that to, okay, let's go ahead and do it, because we do have a pool of really qualified candidates for that position. Now, let me go ahead and ask you this question. Or do you have a remark to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, one of the things also is when opportunities avail itself, sometimes our women feel shy to come forward. But it is good that we are having this conversation. I hope tomorrow when I get to the office, I can see some of these qualified women who have done conflict resolution and who have the papers come to me and say, hey, we want to participate. Because really it will be hard for us also to go around looking for women who want to move stuff. So that's just the comment I want. It's good that we are having this conversation.
Okay, no problem. We'll go ahead and discuss this with the South Sudan Women's Intellectuals Forum, and we'll be in contact with your office. Thank you. Now the question I'm going to ask you is, why should women be included in the agenda of peace negotiation, peace building, and the post-conflict reconstruction in South Sudan? And also, could you go ahead and elaborate on these three terms, because they could be very confusing or might be considered interrelated?
Yeah, women in the agenda of peace negotiation. First of all, women has a certain characteristic that women do not have. Women have the love for life, the love that starts from human psychology, that attachment to life, to the child, that best wishes. It is inborn. A woman would not like to see destruction. And women are very careful about preserving life moving forward. Women also are very brave, by the way. Women are, I should say, women are brave than men. I've seen this in my community. When there are challenges, even at night, the woman has the energy to come out when men are hiding or looking for a gun or something like that. And the women are really the sign of hope in the time of challenges. Women keeps that candle in the dark to say that there is tomorrow. Let us look for the children. Let us take care of the children. Let us cultivate. Let us keep something so that children can eat tomorrow. With this, when women negotiate for a resolution of a conflict. And women can easily forgive, because women do not care about what people will say. But if they have decided, they can easily forgive, to say it is okay. Sometimes it's very difficult. For men, it's like it is a defeat that you subdue and you just say, it's okay, I'm sorry, especially in South Sudan, where we have a culture of defense. Everybody wants to defend their territory. Actually, I think that's a habit that we need really to stop. I've been to some countryside in South Sudan where a community always lives, and you find that every time everybody is on the defensive. If you are born in this village, what is the reason for you to move to the next house with a stick? Are you carrying the stick to beat the head of a snake? Or why do we always carry something? That's another habit of defensive. So everybody is on defensive. But when you see women in those villages, women go and fetch water freely. But a man will be carrying a stick. I don't know why. But this is where you are born. You know the houses around you. You know the family around you. Why do you carry a stick? Why do you carry a gun? Why do you take a spear? To spear who? Women are brave. Men are very fearful, and they always want to destroy. If I had a way of changing that culture, I would even rule out that, that culture where even people dance with the stick. Why do you dance with a stick? People go and dance. You should dance without a stick. But if you had somebody with a stick or with a spear or with a knife, why should you move? So I just want to bring it that women are more brave than men, especially in South Sudan. And some of those habits, and women negotiate for for an end to a conflict. But men negotiate always to get the right corner and always be on the defensive. So that's why it is very important to bring women on board. Also, involving women on post-conflict reconstruction is important because women look at the beauty of things. Women do not want to destroy. Even if a woman has how many pairs, I don't know how many handbags, or it is always there, preserved, washed, clean, and kept. So reconstruction of South Sudan, really, if women are in the driver's seat, we can have something that can be tangible because they are looking at the future of their children. They know they are giving birth to children who should live a good life. And so tomorrow for them is very important. For us in peace building, I've been telling people that peace is everything. And to me, I said peace is like oxygen. Peace is oxygen. I don't know how South Sudanese could understand this. And development, good life, is the byproduct of peace. It's like carbon dioxide. You must take oxygen so that you live a life. All what South Sudanese are dreaming about, we cannot achieve it without embracing peace, without saying, I'm sorry, I forgive, I start a new page. If we continue to defend, and I was telling people the other day, if you don't love, nobody will love you. If you always want to revenge, nobody will stop revenging against you. Somebody must revenge. But you must take a step and say, from today, I will not revenge. From today, I will not take the cattle of another person by force. Because if you do, they will also do. So women in the lead are brave, and women in the lead will bring the conflict resolution, conflict management spirit that we need to take our country forward. Back to you.
Yes, thank you for that. There's a comment here from Florence Andrew. I'm going to go ahead and proceed to Dr. Mohandes, but I just wanted to let you know what Florence Andrew stated to you, Honorable Philip. She stated, Honorable Philip, when you talk about we are in the process of identifying and adding women, who are those we that you're referring to? She asked. So I'm going to go ahead to Honorable Mohandes. As one of the signatories to the peace agreement, why do you think all the parties have failed to implement the 35% affirmative action? And what role do you think male champions can play in ensuring that women are included in the decision-making process? Also, before you answer that question, I want to read some comments from two of our viewers. One is from Manchquil Kaur, and he states, the women in South Sudan government had already been given 35% to have participated in political positions, local sections, and so forth, based on the gender equality with those like guys, men. So he's basically saying that women already have the 35%. So what are we talking about, basically? And then we have a comment from Mr. Jackson Madut, and he states, can you talk about the 25% that was always assigned to women in African countries? And why are they only qualified for 25%? So you have a few questions to answer here, Mr. Honorable Mohandes.
Okay. Well, starting with these comments on the fact that women have been given 35%, this 35% is not only a figure. It was not meant to be only a figure, but it was meant to be actual representation, meaning that the women should be in the positions in the institutions of government by at least 35%, and that they should be there to effectively represent the voices of women. But as we speak now, this has not been achieved in most of the institutions of the peace agreement so far created, and that is why there is a concern. Now, with regard to the 25%, generally it depends on the different African countries. There are countries that have performed much better than others in terms of inclusion of women in institutions of government. Countries like Rwanda, And there are countries that have not performed so well. And when you look at their institutions of governance, you find them largely dominated by men. And South Sudan is one example of such. Now, so that's a point of concern, and that's actually why we keep holding these debates to try to create awareness and demand that women's representation is met. When we talk of 25%, which is referred to in most African countries, but 35% in the case of South Sudan at the moment, it is the bare minimum. It doesn't mean that it has to be 35%. We can have women more than that number. We can have 30 to 40, 50, or even 60% of women in any given institution of government. Now, to the question that you asked, yes?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So we have one of the viewers here who has asked the question about the African countries have 25%. South Sudan has most likely not even reached the 35%, let alone really put women in positions. So he's asking, why hasn't South Sudan implemented the 35% thing in ensuring that our women are part of the government?
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, Edmund actually touched on this a little earlier in his responses. Number one is that the way our parties are structured, they are more male-dominated parties. And I can take us back to the period of the High-Level Revitalization Forum, where we negotiated the peace agreement. Edmund and I were part of the High-Level Revitalization Forum representing civil society in the negotiations. Now, we saw that actually all the parties were headed by men. The representatives of the delegations of all the parties were men. Their deputies were all men. Then you come to the spokespersons of all the parties, they were all men. Now, the negotiations were structured in such a way that there would be a lead negotiator who was actually the head of delegation. So you would find that all the people who sat in front, speaking for the parties, were men, deputized by men. And if there was a media briefing, it was a man who would be speaking to the media. So everything was largely dominated by men. This has continued. And one thing critical we realized was that the women in those parties were working under the influence of these men and did not have adequate authority to speak out. Now, that was completely opposite to the women who were with us in civil society. Manasi mentioned some of them. They were bold and open and spoke as full representatives of their institutions, meaning that they carried the voices of women without any fear of repercussions from their constituencies. So if we want to see these parties really move on to implement some of these, first of all, this structural issue needs to be addressed. It may be a long-term issue, but also the way they have failed to implement this 35% affirmative action means that there is some mistrust among these parties. The fear of what could happen in the course of the implementation of the peace agreement. Things might not go well, and you would want to rely on some of these generals whom they have appointed, and some of these generals have forces, and that could be their fallback position in case they do not successfully implement the peace agreement. Remember when the discussions on appointments were going on, in some of the places you'll find generals mobilizing forces to write to their political leaders and said, if you appoint a woman as a governor in this state and anything happens, we should not be held responsible. So there's that level of mistrust of what would happen, and therefore how do you strategically prepare for that? And there is also the issue of rewarding some of these generals, people who have been there in some support of you, either in the bushes with your forces or whichever case, and they wanted to reward some of these guys. And that's partly what happened. Otherwise, the other important reason to note is also what Edmund touched on, the failure of women in political leadership to also advance the call for participation of women, for inclusion of women. We felt bad about this because you would always hear the voices for women's participation strongly coming from the civil society. It's women in civil society or the rest of us in civil society who champion these voices. And if it comes from women in political leadership, it would work very well. I want to take the HLRF also as another example. I mean, as an example. During the high-level revitalization forum, when there was this discussion on the 35% affirmative action, it came from the civil society and women in political leadership. Those who were in the delegations of the different parties joined in. At the end of it, the voices became so strong as a combination of both civil society and the women in the delegations of the parties, and the men in the delegations then said, these people, the women have ganged up on this issue. There is no way. Let us pass this 35% and move on. So if there is a combination of these voices from both sides, it gives an opportunity to be able to realize this 35% affirmative action.
Yes. Oh, you have just unraveled a whole slew of things that are really affecting us women and really in attaining good leadership position. And also the lack of unity among us is a big problem. And our leaders, female leaders on the top, of course, them not pulling those at the bottom up to be on the same level, because they don't realize that you're going to be a minister for only a certain period of your life, and then eventually you'll vacate that position. So who's going to come after you? You know? So it's basically personal interests that outweigh future prospects of building up the leadership of young people. We have a comment here from Rudolph, and he states, while those already in leadership positions can be fitted well by a quote from a former First Lady of the United States, which said, when you walk through that door of opportunity, don't shut behind you. Leave it open so that someone else can also walk through it. Now, Dr. Riak, I'm going to try to ask you this important question.
Eunice, we are losing your voice. Sorry.
Okay.
Your mic. Yeah, just your mic. Yes. Sorry.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the question to you, Dr. Riak, is why is it important for South Sudan to reform the education sector? And what are the benefits? And also, what likely challenges do you think might prevent the reform from actually taking place?
Thank you very much. Before I could come to the education question, I want to intervene and give some perspective on the other discussion about the women, 35% and their participation in governance in South Sudan. I want to say that this country basically belongs to women. If we have to be very honest enough, during the referendum, about 51.5% of the women voted for the independence of South Sudan. And in 2010, 54% voted for the government, the president, and all the cabinet and the member of the parliament we have today. 54% were voted in by the women. All right. And then interestingly, in 2010, 90% of the women voted for the male counterparts. They voted for the male leaders, 90% of the women. So what am I saying? The country belonged to women because they had that decision and they had the numbers, to change the directions and to ensure that the country goes the way they want, because they have a majority, they have a big number in South Sudan. Now the challenge coming in terms of if they get, let's say they get 35% as women, and 35% is not meant for them to have it. It's just meant for them for representation. Then they have to compete within the 65%. So get 35%, keep it aside, and then move forward and compete within 65% that has remained for both male and female, or both male men and women. Now the challenge, as we have alluded to, is that if we had, like, for example, now in the cabinet of South Sudan, the women are 14%. 14% representation. It's very less, right? Very less. For the parliament, that has not yet come back, and with the old parliament, they are 20% of the 400 members of the parliament. Now the question is, even if they have like 5%, for example, what do they do with that 5%? What do they do with the 5%? This is a really, really question that we need to underscore. We have the vice president that is a woman. We have ministers from critical, position like the Ministry of Defense. Then we have the Ministry of Environment. We have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. These are critical ministries. That basically education, Ministry of Education, which is really a basic, important thing for any human being in South Sudan, is headed by a woman. Now the point come back is that what do they do with this position? So that we don't have a civil society that really talk about it, but the women themselves should talk about this. That's where the idea of the Women Council, political women council come in. There's these women from the vice president, from these ministers, should form a council of women leadership to champion the women emancipation and women empowerment across South Sudan. This is really very important. And I think we have to go beyond the affirmative action. We have to go beyond the percentage that are demand to the actual impact of these percentages among the women that have been given the power to lead and to help their own. I just wanted to add that, then to come back to the question that you've asked. So it's important to reform the education in South Sudan for the two objectives. One, to create a relevant market. You have to design education to create jobs in the market. When you create jobs in the market, people make money, the economy is built, and people are able to live, and they have resources among them. We have to do that. The second part of it, we have to do education for transformative of our ideas, ideologies, and whatever you call them. That's where you talk about now the empowerment come in. The empowerment of children, the empowerment of women, the empowerment of other sectors of society that have been neglected because of the cultural variable or the cultural way of life. So in South Sudan, there is a great need and higher need to reform both basic education and the higher education. We have the higher education board, which is critical enough in terms of reforms of higher education, research, and dissemination of higher education values. That Higher Education Council, which is the highest body, has a mandate to look at every 5 years to review the educational curriculum and see the impact of the education at the higher education level. We have seen a lot of challenges when we started here in 2011. And the challenges is that there is a problem on how the education we give to the people is relevant to society. For instance, the education should be it should be a student-centered, not the teacher-centered. It should not be the teacher that provide everything. The student also should take the center and should also work for themselves and be critical thinkers. So you get, in a higher education, you get students that come from the high school, join universities, and these students don't read or write. Where is the problem? The problem is that the problem comes from the basic education, come from the nursery school. They get nursery school, they have no basic ground, they have no really establishment. They come to primary school, they have no real training. They come to secondary school, the same. When they come to university, you get them, they will not be able to read and write a thesis or write maybe an essay. So how do you do this? For you to reform education, you have to begin it from the preschool in South Sudan. Making sure that preschool are well established. Both the girls and boys do very well. They are trained well. When they come to primary school, the same thing is done to them. And then when they come to secondary school and they come to university. There's no way the university will impact any knowledge when the knowledge was not impacted to the kids in the basic school. That's why today students will wish to go for medicines or engineering, the STEM courses, which are critical for the market, but then they have no qualification. Now, when they are not admitted, then the issue of saying we need to get equality. I've seen female who have in the University of Juba who have really good grades from the high school, but when you want them to go to engineering, they don't do very well. Why? Because the training was very poor. So the reformation is very important across South Sudan because we need to ensure that people are trained to go to the market, not the market of South Sudan, but also the regional markets. Already South Sudan is a member of the East African community. Right now we are talking about competition coming from our neighbors in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Burundi. And if the education system doesn't move to look at the markets, then we will be edged out and will be outcompete in South Sudan. And that's the fear South Sudanese have in East Africa. Today, people are asked, I'm an advisor to East African integration. And I was asked that, why do you take people to East Africa? And I say, why? We have to be in East Africa. They said, then we are not prepared. I say, how long do you need to get prepared? How long do you need to get prepared? You got independent in 2011, and you have almost about 10 years. How long do you need? We have to move on to interact with other people so that we are trained and we are also challenged, so that we compete intensively. When I go to Rwanda, I give lectures at the Rwanda University, and they ask me, "Are you a South?" I say, "Yes." I say, "How is your country?" I say, "We are doing very well. We want more South Sudanese." When I go to Nairobi, I do the same thing. So we have to cut across, living from South Sudan and moving to the region and also beyond. So education reformation is important, and it is a key challenge to the government because our percent of the budget every year is less than 3% for the education, both the basic and higher education. And that is a key challenge that we will not move there. One important thing also in the reformation of education is that where are the women voice in this education? Important point is that women are intelligent enough, and they can also be able to be seen in the reformation sector of the education. Why am I saying this? It is untapped knowledge and untapped brains that will think that women are not up to the standard. But when the women are really provided the space, and we show that as male, we leave the space, we don't dominate them, we leave our cultures where women are just sold like commodities when marriages are done, especially for the Nilot culture. You have a daughter of 17 years, you say, yes, I want 100 cows, I want 10 million pounds. If you don't do that, then we can see women really moving up and also reform the education by themselves, by making sure that they take up the STEMs, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is now today what people are looking at. So our education should move from the arts basic to the science basic, so that we do polytechnics, we do functional education. People have to move out from sitting in the offices to be able to go and work for themselves. People we have to leave the offices. The office should be left for other people like civil society. But South Sudanese entirely should get to work, to the market. We should not just be sitting there and say, well, I have a degree, I have a PhD, and you don't work. When I got late, I came back from the market. I was at the market. As a PhD professor, I have to go to the market and see a few things to do. But then if our education doesn't take out to the market and participate in what's going on in terms of, functional and informal sector of education, we neglected, what we call the Juakali for Kenya, then we cannot be able to move further.
Yeah.
Nobody will do our roads. Nobody will build our houses. Nobody will do anything. We have to move further to reform education into what we think is hand-on education than the classroom education. Thank you very much. Back to you. Sorry for taking your time.
No, you've raised some really important points that really our education needs to be reformed from the grassroots level, which starts from the preschool, kindergarten, and then you go to the step of primary one. But we don't have that. Here in America, they've laid the foundation starting from preschool, and then you go to kindergarten, and then you start the primary education. Hopefully we can implement something similar. Mr. Yukani, you have some fans here who are really happy that you're part of the panelists. We have a comment here from Luan Angat Gent. He says, Edmund, my guy, I have your back. And then also, you have a comment here from Jackson Madut. And the comment is actually a question as well. He says, can you ask Mr. Yukani to elaborate on what he said about women in positions to advocate for more women? The question is, were these women appointed to only represent only women for them to make their positions about advocating for other women? So that is the question from Jackson Madut. And also the question from the South Sudan Women Intellectuals Forum to you is, do you agree that the prevalence of gender-based violence and sexual gender-based violence in South Sudan is very high? If so, what do you think are some of the factors that are increasing this rate? And kindly give us an example of the type of gender-based violence and sexual gender-based violence that are prevalent in South Sudan. You're on mute.
Thank you. Want to start with the comment you raised is that, yes, I know when we have a women in leadership, does not mean that this particular female leader have to advocate for inclusion of more women. But what I refer to is that especially when you have women in political parties, not really in the government, in the political parties, women in the political parties need to challenge their fellow male about the importance of having women, because let me tell you, if you are in the market, you are in the church, you are in the mosque, you have no way to be in the government until you have to belong to a political party. And that's why sometimes I'm arguing, what is wrong with that, with the women not forming their own political party? Right now I'm championing a group of women to establish a political party that is female headed and with a young, energetic female to drive that, because what I intend to say is that women in the political parties need to also take responsibility to challenge their own male counterparts, to open the pathway through political parties for men to go to government. But once we're in the government, they deliver service to everybody. They deliver service to male, to female. That's what I like to raise it up there. But before we go further to other part of the question, I'd like to bring some other factors. I know my colleague Rajab will share those arguments together. One of the things that have made the political parties currently violate 35%. One, reward to generals. 3, pressure from generals, because most of the generals are male. And also this sends a signal that the security sector in South Sudan is male dominated. So that's those two impact Rajab Mohandes have raised up. But there's one element I would like to bring forward, because I really follow the party's nomination of the membership into the various seats in the government, whether at national or state level. One particular thing is there's this political concept, which later on I need Dr. Jacob to respond when I have a time too, is the concept of ethnic representation. This concept, this political ideology of ethnic representation have huge impact on women. Because some ethnic groups, though they have a qualified women, they start saying, no, for our ethnic representation, we need to see a male. And that have contributed for undermining of the role of women participation in the political party. So even if you have a women there, the element of ethnic representation, I've seen a case like this, a very practical case. One woman stood up, she won a position, but because of ethnic representation, she's married to another ethnic group. And they say, no, look here, you're not our sister anymore, because you are married to another ethnic group. So you don't represent us, you represent ethnic group, and that particular ethnic group already have this minister. I say, look here, what do you mean? What do you mean by ethnic representation? So this is something that we need to fight, the concept of ethnic representation, because it has huge negative implication. And as I said, I later on want to hear from my colleague, Dr. Jacob, from the element of comparative political science, what does that really mean? Why should we embrace something called ethnic representation, undermine even 35%? And I'm quite sure if we still continue with this element of ethnic representation, will affect women competition in elections. Because if a woman wants to contest, has she been married to another community? If she's married, she came back, is she still a female that represents that particular ethnic identity of the constituency? That's something I want to bring forward. With regard to sexual gender-based violence and gender-based violence, yes, the prevalence is very high. And I'm someone who keep on saying sexual gender-based violence is being used as a weapon of war. And really, it's been headed towards women. There's a new trend coming up, like if you want to harm a community, rape their girls and rape their women. These will make the men remember who you are. So it becomes a weapon of war, being used as a weapon of war. And remember, I right now engaging myself in tracking element of cattle raiding and revenge attacks and rape of women and girls. If you see in the ancient history, even until 2011, until even 2012, there's a lot of incidents of cattle raiding, revenge attacks, women are not being raped. But recently, after 2013, it's evolving as something different now, as people go on raiding cattle and they rape women, they rape girls. And even not only women, they can rape female members of the community. So it becomes a tool where men in using it as a weapon of war, and really it's very high. And the common that I can use as sexual gender-based violence is rape. Rape is common in any incident rape happen. And you come to realize that it's become really big issue. In terms of gender-based violence, beating of housewife is becoming common. It's really taking a huge level. And I would like to say this because I want to use statistics. I work with the Ministry of Interior. We have a department of Interior called Special Protection Unit. It's based in Gudele, Block 9, which bring all the statistics of gender-based violence or sexual gender-based violence across the country. And you can see it's really huge. In a week, we can't receive reports of at least 6 to 7 incidents of rape of women across the country. Now multiply that per month. Look at what impact is it. And I'm speaking on these statistics that are scientific because I sit at that particular special unit and enter the data and review the data and then design advocacy. That's something like this. It's really prevents that it's effective. If you can allow me to make a comment on the education reform. One of the champion, and I think also Philip, when a minister in Western Equatoria, we tried this particular approach. Start building a Girl Child Education Act. Because the question is that, Eunice, I want to share with you, I live in a family with about 3 sisters. If our father is sending us to school, my father will buy my uniform, will buy my access book, will pay my school fees. But for my sister, my father will pay the school fees, will buy the uniform, not buy the access books, but he'll give my sister a little money that you go and please do a certain business. Either you brew alcohol, sell them in order to generate income to buy an access book. This is a complete discrimination right from family level in terms of education for them. So someone like me have to stood up that, okay, I can't send my sister to market because she will fall into love with the boy and she will finish her education. She'll get married in the middle because as a strategy of accessing money. So I think these are issues that when talking about the reforms, we look at the family ideology, family attitude towards education of both male and female. And I think one of the things that we can bring forward is we raise a specific legislation that promotes girls' education. At least we can address. And the reason that we're discriminating the male, because culturally we have imbalance towards the female. So that's what I like to bring forward. And then maybe one point I want to conclude with my colleague Jacob. As women hold position in the government, one of the funny things I realize that is coming on is that you come to realize the concept of male who sit in the cabinet so much is not changing the designing of budgets. Like right now, we have Honorable Angelina, Minister of Defense. Look at budgeting going towards the Minister of Defense. But if you ask a male supposed to be Minister of Defense, what level is the budget? How much money will be shifted in the name of we are responding to insecurity, the Minister of Defense? So these are some of the things we need to investigate, the question of gender responsive budget. Thank you very much.
Yes, so thank you for the important points that you have addressed. I'm going to go ahead and move on to Mr. Manasseh Mathian. Mr. Manasseh, you have a comment here from Tina, and she states, Mr. Manasseh, I did one of the hashtag Hagana Festival, and it was amazing to see national products, including handmade products from our South Sudanese women. We attended that program with our Afghan supervisor, and he was impressed and asked for partnership with Anataban and couldn't stop talking about it. Please keep up the good work. So this is from Tina Peter.
Thank you, Peter, for the encouragement.
So the question to you, Mr. Manasseh, is why is the youth important? And why is it important to empower the youth, including the female youth? And lastly, why is the unemployment of youth so high within the country?
Thank you, Eunice, for those questions. These are important questions. And the first question, why are the youth important? You see, the youth make up the largest block of the population of South Sudan. That is about 72% of the population. And that obviously puts the youth in the position where they are the leading human resource when it comes to development of the nation. The youth are expected to be the ones who are taking lead in different institutions, different professions. They're the ones who are supposed to be in the private sector. The youth are supposed to be in government and in different, in agriculture. They should be the ones dominating because the youth are the largest number of the population. However, on the second part of the question, on the issue of the youth being encouraged and empowered, for sure it's important to empower the youth and in particular the female youths. You know, the culture of there are some cultures in South Sudan that needs to be discouraged. You'll find so many young women between the age of 14 to 25 get to be and while growing up, the ladies are being, the girls are being told that, you know what, one of when going to school, the biggest success in your life is when you get married, you have your home. That is success in the eyes of South Sudanese. And you'll find that many women, many young girls, instead of growing up to wanting to be doctors, wanting to be presidents, wanting to be engineers, farmers, they grow up with a dream of being married. Stops there. And you find that really discourages a lot of the female youth to really dream bigger, wanting to be people, somebody in the society. And then apart from that, you find there's also this culture where the South Sudanese youth really do not try to engage in different sectors in the community. Jacob beautifully talked about the informal sector where the Shabab really are not really encouraged to join these sectors. Jacob also talked about the educational system, which really the level of education that our youth get. You find that it really it really blocks a whole society. I was in one of the states 2 years ago. I was in Lankan County, which is in the Jonglei region, and by that time you'll find that I got most of the youth were just lingering around. There were no opportunities. There was no schools. There was no opportunities of employment. And also another discouraging thing that you'll find that apart from the private sector, which the youth have not really tried to engage in, the other opportunities that are there, you know, the government being the biggest employer in the country so far, you'll find that many youths, especially those that are qualified, they try to get into the government, getting opportunities, but they really get blocked by other senior citizens who may not want to leave the opportunity for these youths to go to try to get these opportunities. But apart from that, you get people who are employed. Many those who got the opportunity to get employed in these government institutions stay 6 months or so with getting their salaries. They get discouraged and back to the street and sit under trees. And there is no, we have not yet encouraged people to have that culture of hard work and trying to explore the opportunities that are there. And when it comes to our young women, the society keeps discouraging many of our sisters from trying to explore opportunities. Most of you find when a young girl wants to try out engineering, they're told no. This is a man's job. They don't get there. The other big block of young women who get married at an early age, they get to their houses, their husbands prevent them from working. So that also gets to decrease on the number of workforce that we have. And this, unfortunately, also opens doors for people who come from other countries who are more empowered to come and get the opportunities that are meant to be for South Sudanese. So what needs to be done is that we need to go out there and encourage the youth to explore different sectors in society. And one major field that has really been ignored by the youth is agriculture. Agriculture is seen by many of the youth as the work of the failed humans in the communities, and this is a field that really we need to encourage more of our youth. We have a vast lands and out there that have not been touched. We have not explored it. We need to encourage the youth to take lead in that. We need to encourage the youth to take lead in different fields in the society, and we also need to encourage the youth to take up the positions of leadership. So again, let's empower the youth to try out different fields, but also encourage investors to invest in education, invest in schools rather than hotels, invest in learning institutions. I do not know how many teachers training schools we have in South Sudan. Perhaps Dr. Jacob might know better, but I have not heard of many, one or two. So we should encourage the investors to invest in different institutions. So yeah, that's my point for now.
Yes. Oh, you raised an important point in terms of really, we youth really focusing on agriculture, because we need to be the breadbasket of Africa, and we have such fertile land as well. So thank you for that, Mr. Matiang. There's a comment here from Monroak Kur, and he states the lack of works for youth in South Sudan is mainly absence of development progressives, especially private companies and human labor. I'm going to move on to you, Honorable Philip. There's a comment here I'd like to read from one of the viewers who states, Professor Philip, Rome was not built in a day. We needed true peace for all these to take place. So I think the comment is based on the remarks that you have made. And then, so the question to you, Honorable Philip, is what are the number of girls attending all levels of education? Why is the number of girls attending all levels of education low in South Sudan? Apart from that, what strategies do you think should be applied to boost the number of girls in schools across South Sudan? And what role should the parents play in this case?
Good. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to make very quick comments on what Edmund raised earlier. One of the things really in politics and also in the participation of women in political careers, especially at the national level, also at the state level, is this notion of community leaders. There are so many communities in South Sudan that have their own leaders. It's really, you limit the participation of everybody because they groom some young community leaders. So in this clan or this ethnic group in this county, the community leader died and then his son has to take over. And when it also comes to political participation, it starts with that community leader. And I have seen in many communities, I've not seen a woman as a community leader whose father died, and then that woman becomes now a community leader, so that if there is any political opportunity, she can participate. So there is that blockage in my thinking to keep women out. And I don't know what women are doing at that level. Of course, at the lower level, it's very difficult for women to come forward. But if all communities in South Sudan have community leaders whose parents passed away are male, then all leaders will be male. So I think that's important point that I wanted to make. And the other thing about education, I've always told people that education is like building a wall with bricks. A brick must sit on another brick. But what we see in South Sudan, I'm really sad that some students go to the university who cannot read or write. And you see this in offices. You see a graduate of a university with their papers, their reasoning does not equal to their paper. I think what really most of us have in South Sudan is paper education. Because education must change our attitude, our habits, our level of interaction. That's why you see most of us are just aggressive and you don't know what type of education we went through, because education should change the way we think, the way we approach people, the way we reason, critical thinking around issues, not only, neck to neck. So these are really issues that there is really no proper education. And I have some points. We had the students who went abroad. These students were the best in South Sudan, but when they went abroad, Eunice, you cannot imagine. What do we get as South Sudanese? This best student in the whole country who scored 99% in senior 4 exams, when she goes or he goes out to represent South Sudan to the best schools with the scholarship, they cannot read and write, they come back. I mean, it's really very sad. Anyway, that aside, the issue of the few number of girls in education. One factor really is those of us who said we have gone to school. You know, like the saying that the eyed man in the land of the blind. When we go back to the village, we behave like the same people there. We want to marry these young girls, but I am a professor in the university. I have a degree, I've gone out, but I go to the village and I marry this little girl who is barely 16 years old. And I say I have gone to school. I mean, where is it? Because education is not just paper. Education is the thinking and transformation. And the other thing, of course, in some corners of South Sudan is the issue of access. That access to education is still very low. But you can see in some states, with the low access, people sit down and discuss and say our girls must go to school. We did this in Western Equatoria for the last 8 years. We sit and engage with the community. It's not just about talking about it in Juba. It's about the minister sitting down with this community who believe in the fact that a girl has no future in education, to convince them. It is me to do that. It is us. It is our generation. It's not just talking about it. So until that time, when we have gone to school, we'll get down, sit down with the community. Our community, by the way, they need the information. They need us to tell them why not, because it is the issue of girls going to study is attached to their customs and tradition. But we can disentangle that by engaging them. And this worked very well in Western Equatoria. So the few numbers of girls in school, this is something we need to do. We need to engage with the parameters of the community. The other thing also is that girls need, some of us parents, especially in the villages, we don't pay attention to it. It's a kalamnuswan. A girl is already in her puberty. She needs to be given the necessary facilities she needs to be in school for the whole month. But the father thinks those are something for the kalamnuswan. It's between a girl and her mother. But the mother does not work, does not even have 100 pounds. And so this girl will find that border boy who minds about her needs, who gives her the 100 pounds to buy her pads. So the boy becomes better than her father because the boy understands her needs. And the girl falls in love with the boy and gets pregnant. So again, really, it's about us engaging with our community to transform. A community must transform. But transformation needs consistent engagement, sitting down to change the mindset of the people. I want to leave it there for now.
Wow, I really appreciate the depth of information you provided. And just I could see, and the viewers could see the passion that you have to reform our country, to make it better. Because, you know, I myself am my parent. I don't know if most of you are parents, and I have girls. So what kind of environment do we want to create for our young girls who are growing up? You know, so because it is their future that we need to work towards, and when we work towards their future, then we ensure that our country becomes more prosperous. So thank you very much, Honorable Philip. And you have a comment here from one of the viewers, Yang Koda. She says you are correct with this, Honorable Philip. So she really appreciates your comment as well. We're going to go ahead and proceed to Honorable Mohandes. I'm going to read a comment here, Honorable Mohandes, and it is from Kennedy Swaka. Mr. Swaka says, this is a nice forum, but do our policymakers follow such an important discussion like we have today? So basically, do our leaders in position both in the government, the civil society, and at the grassroots level pay attention to such important discussions? And then the question to you from SSWI, the South Sudan Women Intelligence Forum, is, now that the main signatories to the agreement has failed to meet the 35% affirmative action, what is your role as a civil society and signatories to the agreement in ensuring that the 35% affirmative action is honored? Yes, Honorable Mohandes, can you hear me? Honorable Mohandes.
Okay. Yes, I'm here. Let me just have a word on the comment that was sent to Honorable Pia Philip, that Rome was not built in a day. These are some of the negative, beliefs that we carry, and they discourage us a lot. We are in the 21st century. The time Rome was built, the building materials were different. We carried on heads. People would carry stones on their heads. Today, we have developed to the extent that we have technology and things have improved. So the building of Rome cannot be compared to the building of a country in the 21st century. We are aware of people saying, there is no hurry in Africa. People are even accustomed to this thing we used to call Sudan local time. Others would say, we are not white and all this. So some of these things are discouraging. Anyway, moving to this question on 35% affirmative action, as signatories, but also as citizens of this country, we have a role to play. One is that we need to remind the parties with a clear analysis of where the gaps are. Like in terms of percentages of women missing in the different institutions. And the South Sudan Women's Intellectual Forum did this when the first state cabinets were appointed. There was a table indicating the different positions, different institutions, and the percentages, which is very important. So we as civil society would need to do that and remind the parties that here you did not do well, and here you missed out, and so there's need to correct here and there. And we should be calling for compensation. The institutions are not all established as it stands now. And where there will be more appointments, for example, in the assembly, there should really be a deliberate consideration to ensure that women are compensated, or the participation of women is also covered very well in the remaining institutions. But there are situations where we find replacement in some of these institutions. There may be a need to replace the governor. Now, if there was a position where the 35% was not met, it is then important where some of these replacements happen, women should be definitely appointed to cover up. But there is need for a long-term solution to this as well. Most of these things are temporary solutions to the current situation of peace agreement. But in the long term, there is need to build political parties that are women-led, like Edmund said earlier, so that the women do not remain in a position of only pleading for positions from men in the political parties, but they become in charge of even giving out positions in the political parties. So building political parties that are led by women is important. There is nothing difficult about it, and the law allows for it. So that is something that women need to begin looking at, but also as the civil society will be working very closely to ensure that this begins to take shape.
Yes, thank you indeed very much. And we appreciate the feedback that you provided in terms of, Rome was not built in a day. It takes time, but we cannot stop and just note on the challenges we face. We have to work towards improving our country. So thank you, Honorable Mohandes. Dr. Riak, you have a comment here from Juan Adija, and it states that, thank you, Dr. Jacob, education is the key. And then you also have another comment here. Let me pull it up. It is from One Rock 4, and it states, Dr. Jacob, you talk on the gender equality in South Sudan for a lot of women's representation in education in higher numbers. Okay, let me read it again. Dr. Jacob, you talk on the gender equality in South Sudan for a lot of women's representation high in number in the government. If the government could mainly work when we had abundant education incorporated across South Sudan, especially when we have given up some of our bad cultures, heritage, which has no sense at our national representation. So I don't know if you understand what the person is asking. Do you grasp it?
Thank you very much, Eunice. if I get the second question, the first thing was a comment that to thank me for issue of education, and the second one was about, I think if I captured very well, was about the cultures. So the question was, if we want to promote education, what about the cultures? So the cultures and the education. Is that the question asking? What the question asking?
Yes. That we should really stop some of these bad cultures from really taking over our country, because it's impacting the educational sector. And also, the South Sudan Women's Legislative Forum have questions for you here. The question is, why does educational reform deserve a holistic examination of the reasons, objectives, application, and results generated by those within the school systems where they are being implemented?
Well, thank you very much, Eunice. I think my network is getting bad, but I just got to all the question you've raised. So before I come to the educational question, there was something Edmund Yukani was referring to me to interpret as a political scientist about the ethnic community, or what we normally call ethnic politics. Whether it is fair for ethnicity to be represented by men. That is very wrong in South Sudan. So when we talk about ethnicity, well, the first thing is that the peace agreement we have in South Sudan, the revitalized agreement, is a negative peace. It's not a positive peace. It's a negative peace in the sense that, as Galtun say, is a peace that was built on power sharing. It's about the elites sharing power, they cut the cakes, and they say, this is what we want. So that peace, being a lead share and being also male-dominated, it ends up with the male dominating the peace agreement. So that's basically the challenge we are facing. But then, in the sense of ethnicities, having ethnicities in the government, that's not a very bad concept. It's a good concept, though, because you have communities that come up from that country, and they should be represented. And this is what Aaron Lipet say about the constitutional model. The constitutional model of power sharing is whereby you have four important components. The first one is the regional autonomy, community autonomy, political parties, and then you have the coalition government. So we want to make sure that we have a constitutional model. People see the government as their own government, then they have to be represented by all these four elements. So political parties are not doing well in South Sudan. So what happened? People going back to the communities. And the communities actually are supposed to be representative of both male and female. So if they say that we want a minister from community X, so it should not be just male that come every time. They should also be female, because they are part of the community. It should not be our cultures, especially the Nylon. I used to remember when I was a kid, when a woman is in the house or in the luwak, and people come and ask, who is at home? The woman say, nobody's at home. People have left, nobody's at home. And she is just there in the house. And I just said, nobody's in the luwak, you know? So we should not have those cultures. That way you deny that you exist and you should be existing. So when people are told the Azande should get a minister, the minister should not come to be a male. The Azande have their own women. The same thing to Lotuko, or the same thing to Sholop. It should not be that. The second thing is that the leaders that are leading these communities should not actually be male. And this is what we said earlier. Because wherever they are male, then they are recognized by the government. Let's say, for example, I have a community leader where I come from who has been in the leadership since 1994 as a community leader. So today, when the chances come from my area, then he's the one who goes and say, yeah, look here, I will give you the name, and then you get the name to come from whoever he thinks, and probably 90% are male or 95% male that he recommends. And this is really not what we think. So ethnic politics is a cross-cutting thing. This representation should come from both male and female. And when we talk about people, a female and a male, they are people. You should not say that nobody is in the house and you are there as a female. You are a human being. So women are superhuman beings. They have all the intellects and the skills and what the male also have. So that's very important. And I wanted to tell Brother Edmund Yukani that is very wrong. If they interpret ethnic politics as male dominated, that is an oppressive culture in South Sudan and should change immediately. The women have the right. If you are married to a Nuer, and you are, like, for example, I have a lady I know very well. She's a minister. She comes from Ruweng, and she's married to Bentiu. Yeah, Nadia Robdudi. So when she became a minister, she came being a minister from her married place as a Nuer of Bentiu. And she has a right as a Nuer of Bentiu. She's married there. She has a right. If you are married within your community, and the thing you can represent them, you can represent them. It doesn't matter where you come from. So women have that representation, ethnicity, or ideologically, wherever, they have a right to get the position that they deserve. On the education matter, it's important to acknowledge that the reform process of education in South Sudan has been very, very difficult enough. And one of the challenges is the resources, the money. We have been talking about resources since this country got independent, and we know what happened. So for us to reform education, we must have resources so that we uplift everybody at the same level. The girl-child education is critical, and the Western Equatoria has done very well. So it can also be borrowed as a model across South Sudan. The Upper Nile region has been in war for the last few years. And you can argue today, you cannot talk about girl education, you can talk about support that are given to the people because they are all displaced. They are all in Equatorial region. Talk about Juba, talk about Eastern Equatoria, and so on and so forth. So what's important is that when people are displaced, the same education should provide to them. The people who come from Bor are now in Mangala. The girl child education that was in Bor should also follow up to Mangala. And it should also be supported to ensure that they also catch up and they also do very well like other counterparts in other parts of South Sudan. So the reformation of education is critical and should be very systematic. It should not be a piecemeal. It should be a very systematic approach whereby we look at a curriculum from the basic up to the higher education. And we look at the examinations, the rules of exams. I remember last few weeks we had exam in the University of Juba. And female are very intelligent enough. So I had a lady who actually who was caught cheating. And what she did was a more Kenya. They when you write small thing and you put them actually somewhere in your chase. So when a supervisor left or the vigilator, then they were able now to write. So when the case was brought to me, I asked her, what happened that you were able to copy? And she said, look, you know, I wanted to pass, but I was not trained very well when I was at basic school. And I feel like I'm in the university, I'm trying my level best to make sure that I pass like the other male colleague. And I say, look here, this is a very serious crime at the university. And you have to be given a warning. And then your marks will not be ready. So, and I think the height to do that, which is illegal in the university, is that the passion for you to pass the exam and the feeling that you are at the university and you are also like others. But then the challenge is that you have not been trained well when you come from. So reformation of education is critical. And I believe that we should not leave anything. We should not look at one sector. I keep saying that if we talk about higher education without the basic education, we are not doing well in South Sudan. And I truly believe that the critical thinking should not begin at the higher education. It should begin at the basic school. Children should be taught, should be trained, should be asked questions that they should answer. Children should come up with the creative thinking that the teachers should improve and should also give them support to think independently. The idea of having 70% coming from a teacher should change. I should only give 20% or 30%, and the student should take 70%, so that they are able to innovate. They are able to innovate. I came across I went to the riverside the other day, and I saw one of the young men was working on airplane. He actually built a sort of aircraft, and I asked him, how do you think about this? What is the objective? This is a research-based thing. And he told me that I'm thinking of building this and get a machine so that I feel like, or get something like a support from friends so that I make sure that this plane take off. And I said, how does it take off? It's a structure. He said, no, it will take off by all means. I said, the desire of you having this aircraft that you have built taking off is a super desire. And this is the knowledge that we want. This is the thing that we want. The South Sudanese can think that they can change the world. You can change the world by doing anything that you think you have the potential in. So we have a big challenge in South Sudan, but I believe if we unite all of us, if we share ideas and say we can change the situation, we can change that. The challenge is that the educated class don't come out. They don't talk to their communities, and they don't talk to their own fears, and they don't discuss these issues. But if we agree that we can change our situation, we can do it better, and we can be respected all over the world. And women can also be seen to be the leaders of South Sudan. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much as well, Dr. Jacob. We have a comment here from Anita Guma. She says, I'm so impressed, Dr. Jacob. So you're impacting our viewers by the wonderful remarks that you've made. I'm going to go on to Mr. Yukani. There's a comment here from Dora Pony Oral, and she states, how can you men address change the prevailing mindset of some men within our society is that itamara sakit. So how can that be addressed within the context of South Sudan? And then we have also a comment addressed to you that is from Tina Peter, and she says that remarks that you made in terms of the rape in South Sudan, the percentage, is it based on Juba alone or also other states within the country? And then the question to you from the South Sudan Women's Intellectual Forum is, please tell us more about SEPO and what kind of achievements the organization has made. Also, how many women have benefited from the programs within your within SEPO, and what challenges is the organization facing at the current moment?
Okay. Thank you. One, with regard to the change of men attitudes, I think for me the best way is for us to promote, and which I would like to make it as a recommendation of this forum, is for us to promote men-to-men dialogue on gender, because some of the men need really to understand why it's important to work side by side with the women. By the way, when my colleague Rajab was talking about the 5%, we're among those men who stood up during the peace process. We're calling for 50-50, side by side. We don't want to see 35% anything. Affirmative action will be 50-50. So it's a time for us to educate our fellow men. Actually, we as a man, we need to speak to our fellow men who say Mara Sakit. Because when you say Mara Sakit, you're in the office, who is taking care of the house? When you say Mara Sakit, who's breastfeeding the child, that more you beat your chest that this is my child successful. So there's nothing called Mara Sakit. And I used to joke when the parties were doing nomination. Some party members make their meetings for nominating their members to the various positions in the government. The meeting has to be held at 1 a.m. And they have a question that whose wife will go and attend that meeting? I say, but also whose husband will go to attend that meeting? So this concept of Mara Sakit, for me, it is a negative attitude, is a negative stereotype from a man who are traditionally still, I don't know what can I describe them, but I think they feel as if men is everything. And I think for me, the only option is for people like us to speak to them. We need to confront them and tell them the reality. And that's why sometimes I like to work with my sisters, with the daughters of my brother, to show fellow men that look here, they're as equal as like what Dr. Jacob said, they're human beings. It's nothing that a woman is really human beings. We're not people, we are all equal. So that's what I like to put forward.
Me for a moment. Dr. Jacob, okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's what I would like to put forward. Coming to the percentage per day is a countrywide. The system we have is that in all the states, we have what you call state police commissioner. Under each state police commissioner, we have a gender focal point that on daily basis collect incidents of rape. Of course, let me tell you, these are only reported cases. We have cases which undergone unreported across the country. So on daily basis, we transmit those information from across the country. But as I'm saying, these are the only reported cases. In some of the rural communities, actually even rape cannot be reported because it seems like it's something very harmful, it's something against the family. So they have to go quiet. So these are only reported, but I'm quite sure there are more than that in terms of the percentages. Coming to SEPO, I think for SEPO is that, we have a program which is specifically focusing on women. We call it Status of Women Initiative. Out of our beneficiaries across the country, we have now seen at least 7 of our beneficiaries have become female ministers, holding various positions, train them on really how to take up responsibilities. So those are some of the things that women are benefiting. And we have been having quite a number of trainings that we provide specifically. We target female politicians when they are ministers or they're not ministers. We make that we empower them in terms of knowledge, because knowledge is a power, as we have been saying in this particular discussion. Recently, we've been working with Mama Rebecca as a vice president to challenge the issue of the parties violating that 5%. Remember, we went on air and challenging the parties that were taking them to court. And as we're speaking right now, we have a court case against the political parties for undermining 35%. I know some people will say it's too late, but it's a good start. Teach the parties that nobody will have them go accountable. And we have told our minister of justice and our judicial system, if our national institutions of justice cannot respond to our quest, of asking the political parties in a court of law, we'll take them to East African Court of Justice, because we have successful cases in East African Court of Justice, and you are now, Rajab, as you're part of East African community. So if they fail to speak here, if they fail to respond here, let's take them to Arusha and let them answer why do they violate 35%? What is missing? What is wrong? So some of the things that SEPO is doing, and we have a broader program under the State of Women Initiatives. We have been campaigning for Girl Child Education Act, as I was referring to Honorable Piers when he was a minister. I was in interaction with Piers about how to put up that, because one is still like Central Equatoria have already enacted a girl child education, and now we're putting a lot of resources to make sure that there's special focus on those vulnerable girls in the vulnerable families that they don't have access to school. So we use this act to lobby some donors to put much more work. What are the challenges that we're facing? One, there's a little appetite. There's a little appetite from politicians, especially political leaders in the country, to really take the call for gender mainstreaming serious. So they still have this concept, the issues and so on, these are women issues, and you can see even one of the challenges we have that when talk about gender, we talk about bringing collective role of men and women, then you push to NGOs. So in terms of funding, there's no concrete national funding for this issue. Most of them are donor-driven, are NGOs focused. So come to us, for example, Minister of Gender has been standard to become a UN women-funded NPT, UNPA. The national budget is not focusing on that, and that's a big challenge in terms of our advocacy. If we're advocating, we're speaking to technocrats in the government that have no any resources to take our advocacy into reality. So we have to invest money putting into that. And in some areas, some donors say when you put your money directly supporting a government, then they are not interested in that. Also, there's a donors concepts about how do we give NGOs money, and the NGOs takes our money, give it to the government. It's the same like we're funding the government directly. Those are some of the challenges that we're facing. And of course, besides infrastructure in the country, reaching out to the actual vulnerable women, like what my colleague was saying, that women in the rural communities are really more suffering than women in the urban setup. Those are some of the challenges that we're facing. But as SEPO, we have been pushing so much. As right now, one of the things we're pushing is that we're pushing Rebecca to establish a council that Dr. Jacob will talk about it. But Dr. Jacob, my experience as we're calling for women to establish a council, a fellow female minister start customizing to political. Say, look here, this is of women council without a political ownership. They don't like it. So they come from a strong party and start deciding that no, we as a party, we have our women league. We don't want to see any. And that's a very strong minister holding a position of parliamentary affairs. So we need to really change attitudes among female ministers that are really in power. And I hope that they are listening in this forum. And really, we need to challenge some of them. Some of them are so negative. It's supporting. But when you see them before donors, when you see them before ambassadors, they speak nice. But when it comes to the reality, translate what you tell ambassadors into the government functions, into the government representation, they shy off because simply the political party manifesto constrain them not to push that. But that is for donor mobilization. So if we have female ministers who listen to us in this forum and they respond to donors on the issue of speaking here positively and they don't translate, I would like to say they align to the society of South Sudan. There, I would say up here, over there to you.
Thank you for the comments that you've made. And I know for many years, SEPO has been at the forefront of fighting for not only people in the grassroots level, but also women, right? So we thank you for those comments. We're coming towards, we're running out of time. So if you could make your comments brief onwards, that would be appreciated. Mr. Manasseh, so the question for you here is, in regards to Ghana Chaban and the work that you've been doing, amazing work, is what roles can the youth play in the peace process, decision making, and national building? And also, what are the current initiatives being done to empower the youth in South Sudan?
Okay, thank you very much.
The background. So I'm not sure where the echo is coming from.
Okay. All right. Are you still hearing the echo?
Not now.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll start by encouraging the youth that, you know, there is this statement that we keep on being told that you are the leader of tomorrow. The youths are the leader of tomorrow. That is nonsense. You need to. We need to play a huge role. As I mentioned earlier, we are the biggest block of the population of the community. So the youth actually have to participate in all levels of leadership. And to answer your question, I will encourage the youth. There are different ways in which you can participate in peace processes, in decision making, different levels. I'd like to mention about three. First of all, you can participate directly by one, if there are peace processes that are happening, like negotiations, just like in HLRF that I mentioned, the youth can play a big role being in the forefront, in the negotiation room, negotiating. It just happened to be that the youth have been the ones on the forefront when it comes to conflict, and it's just natural that we can also play a big role in being in the peace processes. So in the negotiation room, create your space there. When it comes to leadership positions, I encourage the youth to join politics. You are leaders today. You can be leaders today. Join the political parties. Try to push to be present, be represented, to be part of any form of leadership in the government or in other institutions. Secondly, the youth can also play a huge role behind the scenes. You'll realize right now, I am glad that in the state ministries that have been announced, there is quite a huge percentage of youths there. But also behind the scenes, you'll find the youths have also been really influential in decision making. Those who are in the executive offices, they have played a huge role. But lastly, I also want to encourage the rest of the youth. You can play a huge role in being a decision maker in any other fields apart from politics. You can be in the private sector, and at the end of the day, being a stakeholder in the private sector, you can make decisions in this country. You can also participate in trying to in joining other fields like the civil society, and push to ensure that advocate for different issues that you feel like is affecting community. And through Anataban, we have been encouraging the youth to be fully engaged through the Anataban Juahila program, where we have been trying to mentor the youth in the community to participate in trying to get solutions to issues in the community, and trying to be in the forefront of developing the community through the Hagana program. We have always encouraged the youth that, we are the largest bloc, and we can actually influence and decide on the on the future of the country, on the narrative that is communicated in the society, the culture of the society. And so, finally, what I'd like to tell the youth, because I see time is really short, I'd like to tell the youth that try to see what role you can play as a youth, and mostly even the female youth. People in the society will try to discourage you, to try to tell you that you are still young. Apart from being told it's a Mara circuit, you're also being told it's a Shafe circuit. You can't. The society from different levels is trying to discourage you to be more influential in the community. I'd like to tell you that you have the power. Organize, inspire yourselves, and do much. You can be a real changer a real change in the society. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the comments that you've stated. And we have a comment from you, Mr. Mathiang. It's from Mona Lisa Mathiang. She says the comments you have stated are very true. So thank you. And now we're going to move on I'm going to go ahead and ask each of you panelists your last questions from the South Sudan Women's Elections Forum. And the last question to you, Honorable Philip, is what challenges are hindering women in South Sudan from participating in the national building, and what are your recommendations moving forward?
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I will try to be very brief, maybe in about 2 minutes. First of all, one of the major challenges are women themselves. They don't open enough space for their sisters. They don't try to the extent possible to pull the others on board to participate. And also, there is that culture or habit of only certain super women. Probably that really closes the other because it is like me and only and nobody coming nearer. So that's one thing that needs to happen. The other thing is cultural hindrances and customs. And also some women believe that they are not, they're just women. I mean, I like the comment from Dr. Jacob, that culture still ties them down. So that also in their mindset is like they cannot compete, they cannot manage. There are only very few that they see ahead there. My recommendation really, number one is, as somebody from the Ministry of Peace Building, is for us, for women to participate, we really need peace. And not a peace that would be run by Juba, but peace that a community can sit in your village, in your county, in your Payam, and say, we have fought enough, we need to change and transform, so that partners can come, government can come. But when there is no peace, all what we talk about, because South Sudan is not Juba, South Sudan is out there in the States. But we really need to take steps, concrete steps among ourselves, as counties, as communities, to start to forgive, to start open corridors for services to come, so that we can transform our community. That's one. Number two is that I want to encourage different communities of South Sudan that women getting into politics should not be on the basis of communities. It should be really through political parties, because it's really very hard for a woman to become a community leader in order to get up and connect. We should use political parties to the extent possible. And again, we need to, those of us who are in school, like our women, please, you need not only to stay in Juba and talk about communities, you really need to mobilize yourself, go to the community, sit down with the chiefs, with the women leaders, with the youth leaders, talk to them about the importance of education and the importance of participation, where we are now in the 21st century and where our parents were. And we really need to, work together. Also, men, we need to have this block of transformation, communities, people who have gone to school, going down and doing these things. Finally, the issue of fake papers. I think this is also because a woman would not like to fake papers, by the way. If there are those who are doing it, they are very few. But the fake documents in Juba seem to keep women out. I think what the government need to do is to come up with that verification model. Verification model. You don't have the paper, you are a son of a general, we are sorry. You have a fake paper, you cannot enter into the civil service. And I want to thank you very much for this opportunity today. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. You have a comment here, Honorable Philip, from Anita Gamu. She states, yes, I agree with you, Honorable Philip, of women being blocked or pulling down by their own fellow women. Then she states, what is the way forward in such a case? Now I'm going to go ahead and address to you a question, Honorable Mohandes. The question is, what is a civil society and why is it important in any given country? Apart from that, what role is the civil society playing in peace building in South Sudan? And are women, many women, part of civil society activities or activism in South Sudan? In addition, how effective are their collective voice in bringing peace? Also, lastly, what are the challenges facing the civil society And what are your recommendations moving forward?
Okay, thank you. Now, with the time left, I may not do justice to this question, but to be very brief, really, civil society, in simple terms, refers to associations or groups of individuals who are not part of government and, of course, not part of business and also not part of families. They are just interest groups that come together to advance collective interests or agenda. And in that regard, we as civil society members are independent of government and also independent of businesses. And I want to state here that we are so much misunderstood in the country, partly because maybe the concept is new, but also in terms of politics from the history of our struggle, you'll realize that it is either you are part of a given political institution or you are against a given political institution. So where political entities, whether opposition or government, feel that the civil society is saying something that does not agree with their agenda, they label the civil society as something else, either as opposition or as government. But in reality, we are completely independent. I just wanted to clarify that for better understanding of who we are, and we always seek to be understood correctly. Now, what role do we play in peace building? First of all, if you go around the country, you will find hundreds of community dialogues or peace dialogues being held almost everywhere. Civil society members are always involved in promoting that. We are involved in, bridging the gap between the people and the public institutions. And in the peace process, we carried the voices of the people to these processes. And as you can see, some of the outcomes of the agreement in the content of this agreement directly came from civil society, including the 35% affirmative action. Now, we are still engaged in the process and we do research, we generate knowledge on what is happening with the processes, and we provide recommendations and lead advocacy with the political institutions and also partners to the peace agreement to call for implementation of the peace process in a manner that responds to the needs of the country, or in a manner that meets the intended objectives of the peace agreement. Are there women in the civil society? Obviously, yes. Many civil society organizations are women-led, and they play very critical roles as well. You know, as we do advocacy in different ways, there are moments where we would actually want the voices of the women to come up, and they take lead in some of the advocacy issues, and that they do it very well. And so they play a critical role. They are part of the civil society. And I just want to bring this as an example. When we were approaching the high-level revitalization forum, we came together as civil society across all these divides. Civil society members who were based in South Sudan, those who were based in non-government controlled areas, our colleagues who were outside South Sudan to team up together. And with us, the representation of women was very strong, our female colleagues. Now, what challenges do we face? The first challenge we face is misunderstanding of who we are. When we talk to political leaders and we try to push with them, they say you are speaking the voices of our enemies, and that applies to any of these groups. There were moments. There was a time we went and met a group that was in opposition, and this group asked us, "Who sent you? Were you agents of the government?" And they named all other oppositions except themselves, whether we came from those opposition or we were sent by them. And we had to explain, spend a lot of time. And then we are agents of peace, but we are seen as enemies of the state. And so sometimes forces of the state are directed at us, even innocent as we are. And our voices have been consistent, calling for peace and development and progress in our country. Now,
before you go further, there's a comment here, an important comment I'd like you to remark on. It's from Richard Omene Albino. He says, unfortunately, Brother Rajab, civil society and other unions are not independent in our beloved country, South Sudan.
Yes, well, these are the perceptions about the civil society. It is a perception, that may not necessarily be accurate. But if I should go further to explain the civil society space, it is occupied by civil society members, but we are fully aware, these colleagues who are in the civil society are very much aware of colleagues who have occupied the civil society space, who are directly known as agents of either political parties or security agents of these political institutions. They are there not necessarily to advance the same agenda that the civil society advances. They are there either to spy on the civil society, they are there to distort the voices of the civil society, or they are there to harass the civil society in a way. So that is one aspect of it. There are questions like, now, who funds the civil society to do what they do? In that regard, it is also believed that because civil society gets support from international agencies, therefore they advance the agenda of those international agencies. That is not necessarily true as well. Billions of dollars are injected in African countries or to governments all over. When you watch our television, every evening our ministers go and appreciate partners who provide funding to South Sudan. That does not mean whatever the ministers say are dictated by the funding agencies or countries. It's the same with the civil society. We speak the voices. Everything we have been discussing here is about peace and progress in our country. No one dictates some of these things to us. So we are absolutely independent, but we recognize the fact that there are colleagues in the civil society who may not necessarily be civil society members. Now, what do we do in this situation? First of all, we need to remain objective and contribute constructively, and also keep explaining who we are for better understanding. The final thing I would say, in the interest of time, is that we have colleagues who are missing out, and that goes to the youth. The youth is a combination of male and female youth. Now, I personally have concerns that female youth are missing out a great deal, because when we talk about youth, Manasi referred to very many youth appointed in different positions. If you take a percentage or statistics of these, most of them are male youth. Now, when you go to women who have been appointed to political positions, most of them are women in the middle age and above. So the female youth do not feature so well in the youth quota or youth space in terms of political space, and they do not feature so well also in the women's space. Something the South Sudan Women Intellectuals Forum needs to take serious is how the female youth can feature as youth and also feature as women. I remember some of our colleagues, when they were advancing the agenda of women, they were questioned, are you talking as a woman or are you talking as a youth? Someone can talk as both, because that is the actual definition. I will leave it at this, but thank you very much.
That is quite a funny, but yet, how can I put it, very disheartening remark in asking a woman, are you speaking as a youth or a female? It's unbelievable. Thank you so much for those remarks that you've made. There's a comment here for you from Florence Andrew, Honorable Mohandes. It states, to some extent, some CSO are donor-driven. Donors have their own interests and agendas as well. So she's...
Allow me respond to this very quickly. One category of colleagues in the civil society space that I did not explain. I talked about colleagues who are not necessarily civil society but infiltrate the space. There are colleagues who are objectively civil society, but there are colleagues who are actually NGO employees in the civil society space. They are civil society members whose roles are only implementation of projects that are funded and reporting to the funding agencies and getting their salaries and going home. They have nothing to do with pushing and advocacy and the rest of these things. Now, yes, some donors take advantage of colleagues who are only NGO employees but not civil society activists. So they have nothing to do with advocacy. The rest of the things we do as civil society, their role is just simply project work and salaries, and then they end up there. So in situations like this, there is possibility that they can be influenced by donor agenda. That is likely. But let us not lose the fact that there are colleagues in the civil society who are objectively civil society, and they are driven by the aspirations of the ordinary citizens and would want to see progress and changes, positive changes in our society. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mohandes. Dr. Riak, is political environment and political will affecting the education sector in South Sudan? If you agree, why do you think that is the case? Furthermore, how can this situation be changed? Are there challenges weakening the education sector in South Sudan? And lastly, what are your recommendations moving forward? Before you respond, our viewers, Honorable Pia Philip had to depart for another meeting, so we really appreciate him having contributed such wonderful remarks and suggestions to this discussion. So please go ahead, Dr. Ria.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my network became so bad, so I did not even get your question entirely, but I only got the part of education and what are my recommendation toward this debate. So maybe you can go back again and ask the question. Sorry.
No problem. So the question is political environment and political will affecting the education sector in South Sudan? If that is the case, why do you think that is? Also, how can this situation be changed? Are there challenges weakening the education sector within the country? And what are your recommendations moving forward?
Thank you very much, Eunice. First and foremost, political will is very important in ensuring that the education sector in South Sudan is promoted and is transformed. Why is political will important? Without leaders on the top of the power agreeing that education is critical and very important basic human right in South Sudan, then we will not have better education, we will not have education for all. So political will is very important, and it's critical that leaders that are in power should prioritize education, particularly girl-child education and women empowerment in South Sudan. If we have this in place, then of course, we can be able to have a society that is transformed, a society that is respected, because Mahatma Gandhi had said, you will know a society when you look at the status of women in that society. The status of women are very, very poor and not improved like the women we have in rural areas, women we have in our traditional communities not being uplifted to unleash their potential, that society has not progressed. The society is a society that is regressed, and they cannot be a proud people of that community or of that country. So therefore, political will is critical and important that it helps to push other sectors. When politics is bad, like when American had election in 1992, they said it was economy is stupid. It was economy stupid. That was what Clinton was saying. So in our country, if our politics is not good, then we can easily say it is politics is stupid. So people have to move and do clean politics. And when there is clean politics, it can promote other important sectors such as education in our country. So what can be done in our case is that when we improve our politics, the political will should direct and should help the legislators to legislate laws that are able to protect and empower women in South Sudan. I would like to see in South Sudan that we have legislation in our states and in our federal level here to ensure that the issue of women is taken seriously by all the governments at all levels. Either it is affirmative action or whether it is rights. Rights are responsibilities and obligations of women in our society. The most important thing is girl-child education. We have to have legislation that punish people that have obviously oppressed women and girls in our society. For instance, if our parents decided to sell their daughters at the age of 16, 17 years to get over 100 head of cattle and over 10 million pounds, the law should be clear to punish such parents, to ensure that they are punished severely so that other parents can learn that this is a very bad act. It is an obstructive act. It is a very retrogressive culture that is impeding women to be seen to do what they could do in society, and what God has given them to them, the intelligence, the natural character women have to be able to improve the world, not only South Sudan, but also the entire world. We want to have laws that are able to prohibit people that want to abuse women, especially as sexual gender-based violence, SGBV. People who do rape, they should be punished severely, to teach others that this is something not acceptable in a South Sudan society. So if the government has taken up that seriously, and we the intellectual can take up and campaign and talk about this, we can see a society whereby women can be over 60% educated than the male in South Sudan. And that can also go over time until we have 80% women that are in the next 20 years that take over the society than male, being less, perhaps could be 20%. Of course, we can have the balance of 50%, but we want to ensure that women take up because they are the majority and they can do better. So with all these remarks, I want to say that we have a long way to go, but all of us should participate to ensure that women have their position in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Yes, I'm going to move on to Mr. Yukani. What are the challenges facing women in South Sudan, and what are your recommendations moving forward?
Thank you. I think some of the challenges my colleagues have mentioned. I think number one, it is really putting investment into the gender sector. And I think for me, these investments are one, for women who are already in leadership, capacity building for them. And let me tell you, simple things like public speech, like how to administer an institution, how to bring citizens to the center of the decisions. For me, that particular challenge need to be addressed through capacity building. That's one of the challenges facing women, that even if they take position, their intellect and their preparation to run this institution is a challenge. I'll give, for example, right now, I was looking at some few, I don't want to mention them, but women leaders who are holding key positions at state level. Their public speech is really a problem in addressing the public, in terms of like really having a concrete public speech that deliver and push an interest forward. So I think that's one of the challenges facing women now, besides the education that my colleague, Dr. Rajab mentioned about girl child education is a challenge facing them, but also putting money into process that makes women set narrative for the society, because there's not much more investment in really investing processes that empower women to set up a narrative, because he who sets or she who sets the narrative owns the influence. So we need to make sure that women also set narrative in order to push an agenda. So for me, those are the challenges. What are the recommendations? One, I would really suggest that together with South Sudan Women Leaders Forum, let's establish an online, with the COVID-19 challenges, let's establish an online mentorship and coaching for some of the female leaders who are now holding power in the various ministries. Some of the ministries are so technical that for the first time they're holding it, they need to be empowered, they need to be encouraged, they need to be helped on how to design strategies, how to connect them, to put links with other particular partners that may give money. That's one thing that I'd like to put forward. I know honorable peers have left, but I've been pushing. Recently, we've been assessing how many women are holding portfolio at state level that are associated with women, peace and security, or peace and security in general. We have women who are commissioners of conflict resolution and reconciliation commissions. We have women who are ministers of peace building at state level, and we have women who are members of these peace and reconciliation commissions. So we may need to bring them together and connect them to Her Excellency Vice President to start developing women mediators who can go out there, mediate, negotiate some of this communal violence, so that women serve as playing a big role in relation to peace and security. So I really recommend to the forum that these are some of the things we should work together. And I think one thing that I'd like to really ask, and we're already done with about 6 states, we have established Women Executive Caucus. I think South Sudan Women Leaders Forum, this is an opportunity for us to build those women caucus to set up the agenda of gender mainstreaming at state cabinet discussion. I know legislative structure going to come. We may also have women legislative caucus. So let's take advantage of this. So for me, this is a way forward that I like to suggest as we're holding. But one thing that I like just to conclude with regard to the girl child education, can we take advantage of what we have seen now in Central Equatoria, having a legislation on girl child education, where penalized? I would like to say with Dr. Jacob, right now, the law in Central Equatoria have been applied in 3 counties. It has been applied in Yei, in Lanya. Parents have gone for 5 years simply because of marrying their daughters who are really in school. And recently, because of COVID-19, we have been really punished. And also, please, South Sudan Women Leaders Forum, with regard to GVV, sexual gender-based violence, the Ministry of Interior have recently established GVV court. And this GVV court, in 2 months' time, have jailed both men and youth who are involved in rape. There are about 17 of them who are right now locked in. And this list, the list years that one of them have to serve in the prison because of committing a rape against women is 5 years. I think that we need to appreciate that. So we have positive narratives in the country, but sometimes, of course, we have these challenges where a lot of negative things are more published over what we have little as a positive. So this will I push as a recommendation that we need to put. My final recommendation, South Sudan Women Leaders Forum, women and media, that play a big role. And as SEPO, we have put a magazine called The Voice of Women. We need to really put women there into the media. The only woman you can see as a minister in front page of any newspaper, it's when something is negative about her. If she does something positive, nobody put about her. I used to ask people, how many times since the establishment of the government have you seen Mama Rebecca in the front page compared to Dr. Riek Machar or to compare to Salva Kiir as a president? Always male is in forefront of the media. So we need to bring the female political leaders into the front of the media. And I wish that we should have a media tailored to published actions of women and the efforts of women. Thank you very much. We wish to see ourselves side by side, not percentages.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Yukani. Now, Mr. Manasseh, the final question to you is, what are the challenges facing the youth of South Sudan, especially the female youth, and what are your recommendations moving forward?
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start because I might not get another chance. I'll start by thanking the South Sudan Women Intellectual Forum for having these discussions and inviting us. Thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. And on answering the question, I'll talk about 4 issues that I find really a pressing challenge to the youth and especially the female youth. The first one is what everybody mentioned here is the child marriage. You see, the thing is, right now, one issue that is affecting the fight against child marriage is that the society as a whole has somehow accepted child marriage. If Edmund Yukani right now decides to marry a 13-year-old child, that wedding will be attended by more than 500 or 1,000 people. These people will dance, these people will eat, the women will newly lit. So the society has accepted, and by attending those weddings, by participating in negotiations of dowries, those weddings, as members of the society, you are as guilty as that man who is getting married to that child. Shame on us. That is one thing. So fight that. We, the members of society, should make child marriage a shameful act. And anyone who wants to really engage in that should do it in hiding. And secondly, that act should be criminalized. Edmund talked about what's happening in some parts of Central Equatoria. I'll encourage that be practiced all around the country. You know, it's very disheartening when we see child marriages in other parts of the country being something that is really celebrated. You know, so this thing should be seen as a shameful act, and we all in the society should be able to fight this act. Don't attend those weddings. Secondly, the issue of sexual exploitation in workplaces, in the community. Many of these young women pass through a lot of challenges, especially when looking for jobs. For them to get that job, the person in charge will ask for sexual favors. Well, I would encourage different institutions, both in government and private sector, to make commitments in ensuring that sexual exploitation is not practiced in our workplaces. And then another issue that I would like to say is the obvious ones that I will not want to dwell a lot in repeating. The issue of employment is a challenge affecting the youth. And one point I'd like to say is that people should be able to practice the act of stepping down or resigning or what do I say, or retiring. You know, there should be clear policies and laws in institutions and in government about retirement age. You find that in government institutions, in the army, in other institutions, people who are beyond the working age do not do not want to let go. And also in the youth spaces, you find someone in the age of 45 really trying to join leadership in youth spaces, you know, community groups and other youth spaces. You find someone at the age of 50 boldly going out there announcing that I am a youth leader. Yeah, Jawar, let's create opportunities for the youth to grow. And on the issue of employment also, we'd like to encourage the youth to try out other avenues, try to engage in business and other aspects of life. The peace agreement also has talks about the youth enterprise fund that should actually be practiced and should be what's it called? Should be something that should be realized, and the youth need to start enjoying that opportunity. And finally, the fourth point is the issue of the issue of gender-based violence that was mentioned by Yukani. Again, strict laws should be put to ensure that there is protection of the girl child in different parts of South Sudan. So once again, Eunice and the rest of the panelists, shukran, and God bless you.
Thank you. Before we conclude, I'd like to read some remarks from some of our viewers. One is from Chol S. Toot. He states, "We're one of the best countries in Africa in terms of gender inclusion, particularly in laws that we have established to protect women. We need to appreciate ourselves and move forward to a better society." And then we have a comment here from Tina Pita. She states, "Thank you, gentlemen, for supporting women. Please send a message to other men out there. We need to change the mindset of our men in South Sudan." And then the last comment I'm going to read here is from Mona Lisa Mathian. She states, "Great discussion, gentlemen. Thank you for standing with women. Your perspectives are inspirational, and we hope South Sudan will have more gender champions because the journey is long and change of mindset is a process." The South Sudan Women Intellectuals Forum would like to thank the panelists for contributing their wealth of knowledge and expertise to this important discussion, which is affecting many of our women and men in society. We would also like to thank our South Sudanese ladies and community members who have taken their time to watch and contribute to this discussion. Dear viewers, please join us next time on the South Sudan Women Intellectuals Forum as we continue to learn, empower each other, and improve our society. We also want to thank the UN Women for their partnership. Thank you.